Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be doing my weekly wrap-up. This week, my in-person book group met to discuss William Kent Krueger's novel, The River We Remember. This is a beautiful novel, a murder mystery set in post-World War II Minnesota. It is written in an elegant style that has become characteristic of Krueger. I've done a separate review video on this novel, and I'll put a link to that in the notes below. I also finished this week Margaret Atwood's novel, Oryx and Crake. This was the October pick for the I'm with the Band book club started by my friend MJ at Reading This Life as part of her Read 24 in 2024 banned book challenge. This is a post-apocalyptic novel written in 2003. It tells the story of three friends. Jimmy, later known as Snowman, Glenn, known mostly as Crake, and the woman they both come to love, Oryx. This novel has been shortlisted for many major book awards. This is Margaret Atwood. At the novel's opening, Jimmy, or Snowman, appears to be the last human being left alive after a terrible plague has wiped out the rest of the human race. He lives alone near a species of very primitive, human-like creatures who have language, but who are also very innocent and even childlike. Snowman refers to them as the Crakers. As the novel progresses, alternating between flashbacks leading up to the devastating plague and the post-apocalyptic present, we learn about Snowman's life growing up in a world dominated by these huge corporations that exist in these walled-in compounds that keep out all of the people and the influences from a deteriorating society on the outside. Most of these companies develop and market medical treatments and disturbing genetically engineered animals. This is, in fact, the business that Jimmy's father is in. He was part of the development of a genetically engineered species of animal called the pigoon, which is a hybrid of pigs and raccoons. The animal creations in this novel are the stuff of nightmares, at least for this reader. In his adolescence, Jimmy befriends Crake, a brilliant student of science, who becomes the primary antagonist in the novel as he becomes more and more involved in the world of corporate science. And he becomes the mastermind behind some very disturbing creations. Jimmy and Crake first encounter Oryx in their adolescence when they see her on a child pornography site that they gain access to on the internet. And then she figures in their lives on and off throughout the rest of the novel. This book is one that is currently being targeted by the state of Utah in their recent statewide banning of 13 books by 7 authors, 6 of whom are women. And that's why our club has chosen it for this month's reading. But it had a long history of challenges and, in some cases, bans prior to Utah's most recent decree. Just a few of the recent bans include the following. In 2023, it was banned from school libraries in Willard, Missouri, and in Hanover County, Virginia. Also in 2023, it was initially banned in Beaufort County, South Carolina, but then the school board reversed their decision and allowed it to be returned to school library shelves at the high school level. In Forsyth County, Georgia, it was not banned, but parental permission is required in order to access the book from the school library. In 2024, it has been banned in 3 large Texas districts. And in August of 2024, it was banned statewide in all schools by Utah's State Board of Education. In Utah, all banned books must be removed from libraries and destroyed. I have conflicted feelings about this book. It's Margaret Atwood, so you know that the writing is going to be exceptional. She's a master craftsman of writing. And I could never support anything like a book ban or removal and or destruction of any books. That said, I do believe that this is an adult novel. It wasn't written for kids. Having taught high school English for almost 40 years, I can say unequivocally that I never would have proposed teaching this novel in any of our high school classes. I was very disturbed by much of this novel. Some members of our group are going ahead and they're going to read other volumes, the next 2 volumes in the trilogy. I think I'm not going to do that. I do appreciate the work of Margaret Atwood, and I have read many of her novels. I just don't want to spend any more time at this point in my life in this dark world that she has created in this novel. Atwood warns us in this novel about unbridled advances in genetic engineering and the moral and ethical responsibilities of science and scientists capable of actually creating new forms of life. She also warns us about the unchecked power in some mega corporations who put the quest for profit above everything else. Near and dear to my heart as a lifetime student of the humanities is Atwood's theme of the devaluation of the humanities in our society: language, literature, art, history, especially in favor of science and rampant consumerism. This interest in humanities is also accompanied by an interest in natural history and the history of the human race on Earth. Atwood is warning in this novel that far from making us superior, our scientific progress, if misused and unethically applied, could lead to the extinction of the human race. The novel deals with all of these important themes. There's also a great deal of violence, sex, and very, very disturbing images. Older teenagers might be interested in this post-apocalyptic vision of the world, especially if you tell them that they can't read this book. Having the book in high school libraries and in community libraries is certainly appropriate. Parental approval for kids who want to read this, kids maybe under the age of 16, is probably appropriate also. I would never oppose parental approval or parental guidance in kids' reading choices. I think that's appropriate. But banning and removing and or destroying books, that is just simply never appropriate. I am also continuing to read for Victober, the group read, and that is Mary Elizabeth Braddon's The Doctor's Wife. This novel has been compared to Flaubert's novel, Madame Bovary, and the comparison is probably an apt one, but I would say that Flaubert's novel is a much better book in every way. I'm following the schedule for reading this book for the most part, and frankly, I'm finding it now to be a bit of a slog. Earlier in the novel, when we first started, I found myself absolutely delighted by Braddon's self-mockery of her own tendency to write what were called sensation novels, which were very popular in the Victorian era. This was my first reading of a Braddon novel. I thought she was very funny, and I thought that the book was promising. Now that we're, in week 2 of it, I'm finding it less funny and less entertaining now. I'm sticking with it, and I'm sticking to the schedule, but I'm not really feeling inclined to devour this book or to read ahead. And I think it's just because I'm not really engaged by it. I'm not engaged by the story or by the style. I mean, maybe it's going to take a turn over the next couple of days, but so far it's not really working for me. I love this period in fiction, but I don't think I'm finding this novel to be anywhere near the best example of what this era produced. I will finish it, but I don't think it's going to be a particularly memorable read for me, unless something changes in the next couple of days. I came home from Ireland determined to read more of Oscar Wilde. After hearing so much about him everywhere we went in Ireland. And I'm reading Oscar Wilde now for both Victober and also for the spooky, scary, skeleton Halloween readathon. One delightful work that I read this week was Oscar Wilde's story, The Canterville Ghost. I have seen one movie version of this, and I've also seen an adapted play version of this, but I had never read Wilde's story prior to this week. It was absolutely delightful. This was the very first of Oscar Wilde's stories to be published, and it appeared in 2 parts in February and in March in 1887 in The Court and Society Review. This is the story of an American family, the Otis family. That's Hiram B. Otis and his wife, daughter, and 3 sons who move into an English country house. Canterville Castle, despite warnings that the house is haunted by the ghost of Sir Simon de Canterville. While the American family is skeptical and claims not to believe in ghosts, they cannot deny that there are strange goings on in the house. First, there is this very persistent and constantly reappearing blood stain on the carpet in the parlor in front of the fireplace. Then they start hearing and eventually actually seeing the ghost of Sir Simon. Sir Simon, it seems, had murdered his wife several hundred years before, and then he was imprisoned within the house and starved to death by his wife's brothers. The Americans simply refuse to be intimidated or scared in any way by the ghost. In fact, they begin to torment and haunt the ghost in a humorous reversal of familiar ghost story tropes. In fact, the ghost of Sir Simon soon begins to dread these Americans, and he tries to avoid them as they pursue him relentlessly and quite humorously. Ultimately, though, it is a very special relationship that develops between the ghost and young Virginia Otis, the daughter, that leads to a wonderful resolution in the story. The story is really intended as a parody of Victorian ghost stories, and it's also supposed to be a commentary on both the English aristocracy and also on American vulgarity. Wilde reduces both sides. The fading British aristocracy and the crude invading Americans to quite absurd stereotypes, which really just adds to the humor of the story. I simply loved it. And after reading it, I rewatched the Patrick Stewart version of the movie from, I think, 1996. And I'm about to watch the older 1944 version, which stars Charles Laughton, Robert Young, and Margaret O'Brien. This is not a scary ghost story at all, but it is exactly my speed. Next, I reread Henry James' novella, The Turn of the Screw. And this is a ghost story. This is a Victorian novella and a classic Gothic ghost story. This is a book that I used to teach some years ago, and I taught it for many years, and I love this story. So this was a joy to reread this week. This is a novella with a frame narrative. In a sort of prologue to the ghost story itself, we hear from an outside narrator who has a bunch of house guests over, and they're sitting around a fire and they're telling ghost stories. A member of the group, a man named Douglas, says that he has a manuscript that he would like to share. And he says that this manuscript was written by his sister's governess, late governess. And he would like to read it to the group. Then, over the course of several days, Douglas reads the story to the house guests that are still remaining. Once he starts reading, we get to the bulk of the novella, which is told in the first person. And this is supposed to be the manuscript written by the governess. It's told in her voice. Her story is the story of her taking a job as a governess at a remote country house where she has been hired to be the governess to two orphaned siblings, Miles and his sister Flora. The uncle of the children, who hires the governess, says that he is hiring her on one condition, the condition being that she never trouble him. She is not to contact him under any circumstances. She must take care of any problems that arise. She takes the job. What follows is a Gothic ghost story, where the governess begins to see apparitions of two former employees of the home, a man named Peter Quint and a woman named Miss Jessel, who was a previous governess. And she becomes convinced as the story progresses that the children not only see these spirits, but that they are also communicating with them, that they are in league with the ghosts in some way. That's all I'm going to say about the plot. It's a wonderful Gothic ghost story that has been interpreted in many different ways over the years since it first appeared in both London and in New York in 1898. Initially, it was regarded as a straightforward ghost story. But later interpretations of the novella have suggested that it's more of a psychological study of the governess, who has created these supernatural elements in her own mind. So I leave it up to you to read the novella and decide how you want to interpret it. There have been many play and film adaptations of this story. The Innocents is a 1961 film version. Other films related to the novella are The Others in 2001 and The Turning in 2018. There have also been several American and British television adaptations as well. This is a great story for spooky season. Next up for me in both Victober and the spooky readathon will be Oscar Wilde's only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. And just for Victober, Wilde's play, The Importance of Being Earnest, which is my favorite Oscar Wilde play. There are several plays in this volume. I may read others, but I'm definitely rereading The Importance of Being Earnest. So I hope that you've been having a great reading week as well. And as always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.